Hi, my name is Amy Peterson. I'm a board-certified lactation consultant, and I'm also the author of the book, Balancing Breast and Bottle. I wrote this along with my business partner, who is a speech-language pathologist, and it takes years and years of what we have learned about breastfeeding and bottle feeding dynamics and blends them together to help breastfeeding moms who plan to use a bottle how to do so in a way that supports breastfeeding. So in today's video, I want to talk about bottle pacing, and I also want to talk about some misconceptions that are floating around out there. So first I'm going to go over just some of the basic knowledge part, and then I'm going to show you a video of a little guy I was working with today. First thing is just to talk about what bottle pacing is. Bottle pacing is matching the rhythm of feeding at the breast to the bottle. So every time a baby is breastfeeding, they have their own rhythm. This rhythm depends on how the baby feeds, and it also depends on the mom's milk supply. Your baby's breastfeeding rhythm is going to be different than your friend's breastfeeding rhythm. And this is why there's not one way to pace a baby. When we use a bottle to feed a breastfed baby, what we want to do is pace or match the rhythm that we see at the breast with the bottle. Now, this always begins with a learning curve, because when babies first start out, they have to kind of get the hang of this new skill. So it's not always just an immediate thing that works, but it's something that we actually very carefully work with the baby to teach them how to learn this new skill, and then we watch them swallow and suck and help them regulate their breathing while they're learning this new skill. One of the things bottle pacing helps with, it helps prevent flow preference when a baby is taking a bottle. If mom's flow is slower than the bottle flow and the baby's bottle fed frequently, sometimes they come to prefer the flow of the bottle. And by using bottle pacing, that's one way we can control flow. The other way we can control flow is by looking at the flow of nipples. In our book, Balancing Breast and Bottle, we've actually ranked 53 of the current nipples on the market. They're all slow flow nipples. They're ranked from the slowest flow to the fastest flow. So depending on the baby feeding behaviors you see with your baby, you might need to adjust. And an easy way to do that is to actually know what the flow is, so you can kind of not buy as many bottles. Bottle pacing helps prevent flow preference with the bottle, because it helps us control the flow of milk. Rather than letting the baby chug a bottle all the way down, we can offer breaks when the baby needs a break. The other thing we do with bottle pacing, though, is we watch the baby's feeding behaviors, because sometimes just through their feeding behaviors alone, we know that the flow is not correct and we're actually going to need to use a different nipple. Now, it's important to note that bottle pacing does protect against flow preference. It does not protect against shape preference. If you are bottle pacing with your baby and you're using a nipple that creates a latch that's very different than the breastfeeding latch, you still might have a baby that comes to prefer the bottle. So you need to learn to choose the right nipple shape and choose the right flow. So let's talk about positioning. First, we're going to talk about the position of the bottle. You've probably noticed, if you've watched any other videos on bottle pacing, how we teach to keep the bottle at a horizontal position. The reason we do that is so you can tip the bottle up easily when you're ready for your baby to drink and swallow, and to tip it down easily when you're ready to empty the nipple of milk to let your baby rest for a bit. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions floating around on the internet of why we prefer a horizontal bottle. And I want to take a minute now to just tell you the truth about the horizontal bottle, what it doesn't mean, all right? You might have heard that we want to tip the bottle or keep the bottle at a horizontal position like this, so no milk comes out of the nipple when the baby's not sucking. Well, that's not the reason we do it. As you see with this bottle, let you look at it for a second, nothing comes out when I turn it upside down. The amount of milk that comes out of the nipple totally depends on the type of venting system a bottle has. Bottles don't magically just flow on their own when you tip them upside down. That's not the reason we hold them at a horizontal position. So let's look at a different nipple on the market. This is what happens with most bottle nipples when you turn them upside down. So let's go ahead and turn this one upside down. So we'll see some dripping. Dripping. Just a little bit at the beginning and then it stopped. This is what most bottles on the market do. What happens when you turn a bottle upside down is some of the drips come out while the bottle is equalizing in pressure. Once the air on the outside of the bottle and the air on the inside of the bottle match, so the bottle's equalizing pressure, most bottles will stop dripping. So again, that's not why we keep the bottle at a horizontal angle. Now I'm going to show you why we do. A very few number of bottles on the market have a different type of venting system, and watch what happens when you turn them over. Here you see perpetual dripping. Now this does not mean that this bottle flows quickly. In fact, we have tested over 50 nipples that are on the market right now, and this nipple that drips incessantly is one of the slowest flow nipples on the market. So we don't not hold the bottle like this because we're afraid it's going to overwhelm the baby and the baby will not be able to keep up with the flow. It has nothing to do with flow. It has to do with the venting. So don't worry too much about how you're holding the bottle, particularly if the bottle you use has a different venting system than the one I just showed you. In addition to how we hold the bottle during pace feeding, we also want to be careful of how we hold the baby during pace feeding. And I'm going to show you and talk about a little bit in the video you're about to see of how I hold the baby in a semi-reclined position, and I'm really paying attention to his chin, his back, and his little arms. And then once the video starts going, and this is something that's so important and precious and important for you to do while you're feeding your baby: eye contact. Once your baby starts going, you want your baby to look in your eyes while you're feeding. What happens is when a baby is feeding and they're looking at you, you know feeding feels okay. When babies all of a sudden start looking off to the side or they refuse to make eye contact with you, that's one of the easiest signs for you to see that this doesn't feel right and it's time to tip the bottle down. So it's much more than just holding the bottle and tipping it down. Try and see if you can get your baby to look in your eyes, and that's going to be a great way to indicate if it's time for you to pace the feeding by tipping the bottle down. Now let's talk a little bit about nipple flow. If the bottle flows too quickly, babies will usually sputter and cough. That's just an easy sign that the flow is too fast. If the baby is gulping, where they're going suck, swallow, suck, swallow, suck, swallow, so it's repetitive swallowing, that doesn't necessarily mean that the flow is too fast. That means that the baby's learning how to use a bottle. How does your baby suck and swallow at the breast? If you have a really fast flow, you're probably going to have a baby that's swallow, 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 swallow. And it's okay if the bottle feed looks like that. You want the two to be similar. However, if you have a baby that's more of suck, 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 swallow, suck, suck, swallow, suck, suck, swallow, then you definitely want a nipple that's on the slower side so your baby can have that rhythm with the bottle. But know that just if the baby is gulping or swallowing after every suck, that doesn't necessarily mean too fast. Go ahead and give it a few tries and see if your baby gets the hang of it and if things slow down. So how long should a bottle feed take? Well, let's go back to breastfeeding, because bottle pacing should match breastfeeding. If you only look at the amount of time that your baby is swallowing at the breast, actually feeding, not hanging out, enjoying your company and falling asleep, but just the feeding part, how long does your baby feed? That's about how long bottle pacing is. some moms I've worked with, their baby is finished feeding in 6 minutes. Those babies like to have a bottle feed pretty darn fast. Now, a lot of babies are more like 10, 12 minutes. Okay, with those babies, we're probably going to impose a few rests more often until the baby gets a hang of it. But know that there's not a magic number that you're shooting for. Rather, go ahead and look, how does your baby feed at the breast? And that's the ballpark you're going to look for when you're bottle feeding your baby too. Lastly, and then we'll get to the baby, I want to talk about how long you wait before you introduce a bottle. Now, I know it's recommended to, and even in our book, we talk about waiting till breastfeeding is established. That's ideal. If your baby comes out and is a good breastfeeder, yay, enjoy breastfeeding your baby, and then you can get to bottle feeding later. However, there are some babies that come out that just don't get the hang of breastfeeding. Maybe they'll have one good feeding, or they can't latch and transfer milk, and these are babies that start losing weight and they need to be fed. Bottle pacing is a great tool for these babies. The baby you're about to see was born 3 weeks early. On day 3, I came to see this little baby, and breastfeeding was not working. This was a super sleepy baby. He still wanted to be in the womb. He wasn't ready. So we did a combination of pumping, of bottle pacing with a nipple that helped the baby have a really good mouth placement. So we looked at the shape of the nipple, and we worked on pacing so the baby could have a good rhythm of what we would expect the baby's rhythm would be for a brand newborn baby. And mom, still during this time, would put the baby to the breast and let the baby practice latching, even though the baby wasn't successful transferring milk yet. He went to the breast several times a day just for practice, but his feeding was with a specifically chosen bottle and with pacing. After 4 days of feeding this baby, and the way I just talked about, and pumping and feeding and practice, this baby totally went on to be an exclusively breastfed baby. It is 3 weeks later now, today, from when I worked with this baby before, and the baby has been exclusively breastfeeding for, that would be 2 weeks and 4 days, I think. So the baby hasn't had a bottle until today. When I went over to use the baby in the video today, he had totally forgotten how to bottle feed. He had been so good at it because that was his main rhythm, and now he switched back to he knows how to breastfeed perfectly. So what you'll see with this baby today, bottle feeding was totally new to him. We worked just a little bit to get him used to sucking and breathing and resting. You'll see how long the practice session was. It was really short. Mom's gonna go ahead, since she's planning to return to work, she's gonna go ahead and practice again tomorrow, and then probably give it a couple days and practice again. So I'm telling you this to let you know, the first time you offer a bottle to your baby, it may not be the perfect practice session, but it's just letting your baby get the hang of it. It's like learning to ride a bike. It's something that your baby's gonna learn over time, but this is gonna give you what you need to know so you can get started practicing, so when your baby does need a bottle, he's ready. All right, today I'm gonna show you paced feeding with this cute little one. The first thing I want to talk about is positioning with paced feeding. A lot of times you will hear that it's important to keep the baby upright, and that's true. However, if the baby is actually held very upright, watch what happens. See how the head falls over? It's really hard to drink when your chin is on your chest. So rather than worrying about having your baby sitting upright for paced feeding, we just want your baby elevated. So here you can see he's at about a 45-degree angle, and this would be perfect. Now when I feed a baby, I'm not the mom, so as a professional, I usually hold the baby in my hand, and what I'm doing is I'm putting my finger and thumb behind his little ears, and then that allows, oh, lots of burps, that allows my hand to support kind of by his shoulder blades so he can sit up. not only is his head upright, but his tummy, his tummy's not leaning over like this, because again, that's not the most comfortable way to feed. So I'm going to hold him up like this. You could do it in your arm, particularly once they learn what they're doing, that would be fine, but this is how I usually start. The other thing I'm going to look at when I feed him is where his arms are. Sometimes babies have their arms down at their side. Oh, he's ready, so I'll be quick. If their arms are at their side, it's harder for them to suck. Babies suck the best when their body is drawn in, young babies. So what I'm going to do, and he might do it all by himself, but I'm going to show you where their arms go. Their little arms go right up here, kind of in the center of their chest. So if your baby can keep their arms there, you don't need to address the arms at all. But here with my fingers, I'm holding that in, and I'm going to hold that one in with my chest. So now his little arms are in. So now I know his body's organized, his chin isn't on his chest, he has a nice back that's not all slumped over, and his hands are where they go, so I can begin feeding. Place the empty nipple to his lips and let him latch. And this will give him a chance to get the nipple deeply in his mouth and his lips in the right position. Then I'll tip it up to let the milk flow. Then I'm going to watch him swallow. And he's swallowing. Now I'm going to tip it down just a little bit to let him rest, because we're just getting used to the flow. So he's doing some catch-up breathing, and he's going to start sucking. I'm going to tip it up. 6, 7, 8. So what I'm doing is I'm listening for swallows and seeing if he takes natural breaks on his own. Good job. Now I'm going to let him rest by tipping it down a little. Hello. Can you look at me while you eat? You ready? He'll tell me he's ready when he starts sucking again. Okay. Hey. And I'm listening to swallows. And he's resting on his own that time. And oh, a chooky, bless you. You okay? Okay. That's a good sneeze. So I'll let him root, see if he's ready. You might want to burp. You want to burp? I'll try again. Yep. So let him suck on an empty nipple and tip it up. Can you see me? Hi. There you go. Swallow. I'm going to tip it down and let him catch up with his breathing. Okay. And when he is ready, he starts sucking, and we'll try again. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Good job. I'm going to let you rest a little. See, there's catch-up breathing again, but he's fixing to start swallowing, so I'll tip it up. Good job. So when your baby's learning to bottle feed, you're going to spend a lot of time watching them suck and swallow. This way you can attend to their cues and make sure they're not getting overwhelmed. Can I burp you? Can I burp you? The amount of sucking and swallowing, when the flow is perfect, it's going to be similar to the swallow pattern you see at your own breast. If your baby normally swallows 12 times in a row, that's what you're shooting for with the right flow of nipple. If your baby's a super fast feeder because you have a super fast milk flow, you might find that your baby wants to swallow 15 or 20 or even more times in a row before you tip the bottle down. And that's okay as long as your baby's breathing rhythmically and doesn't look overwhelmed with the feeding. So this little guy, since bottle feeding is so new to him, what he was doing is he would have some swallows that were nice and rhythmic and breathing, and then I could tell by watching him and listening, I could tell he started holding his breath. And that's just because it's a new thing, it's a new skill he's learning. When that happens, you tip the bottle down and you leave it in their mouth and just let them do some catch-up breaths and get back to a good breathing rhythm, and then they'll start sucking when they're ready to feed again. You complete feeding this way where you tip it up and listen to them swallow and make sure that they're breathing rhythmically, and giving them a rest just by tipping the nipple down with the milk out of the nipple until your baby shows that they're finished feeding, and then it's over. The other thing you're going to find in time as your baby gets good at taking a bottle is that they learn to pace themselves. When they're learning to bottle feed like this little one is, we really want to be careful with their breathing and make sure that they're not overwhelmed so they don't dislike feeding in another way. But once they're good at it and it's not a new skill anymore, most babies will swallow rhythmically and then they'll pause, and you won't even need to tip the bottle down anymore. You'll just need to watch your baby and see when your baby's ready for that. So there you have some highlights about bottle pacing for the breastfed baby. If you are a new mom who is breastfeeding and learning to bottle feed, I highly encourage you to grab a copy of Balancing Breast and Bottle Feeding Your Baby. Not only does it cover lots of things that you really need to know to breastfeed successfully, but it covers choosing a bottle in depth, how to offer a bottle for your baby, how to make sure you've chosen the right nipple, and then it goes into pumping your milk, storing your milk, what to do if you don't have enough milk, how to navigate child care and breastfeeding, just so many practical hints. It will save you so much time from needing to Google. Also, I have a class called Beginning Bottle Feeding available online. It's kind of like this. It's a series of videos with handouts detailed over all of the things we did today, but so much more in depth and more. It covers choosing a bottle nipple, how to do that, like what are the differences between the nipples and how to know how to spend your money wisely, and then how to make sure it's a good choice for your baby. It covers pacing way more in depth than we did today, specifically what is pacing at the breast and how you can be confident that you know how your baby breastfeeds and how to duplicate that when it's time to use a bottle. Then it talks about how to offer a bottle to your baby more than what we did today. And then lastly, what you do next to ensure that your baby will be willing to accept a bottle when you're not together. So I'm going to drop some links somewhere near this video. If either of those would be helpful to you, they are available, and I encourage you to take advantage of them so you can be confident while you feed your baby.